Millionaire CEO at a wedding receives an accidental hug from a girl and discovers true love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The flower arrangements in the sprawling garden glimmered under the warm afternoon sun, each bouquet a lavish tribute to the bride and groom's grand union. White roses, pink peonies, and luscious vines intertwined to create a dreamlike passage leading up to a majestic floral arch. Underneath this arch, the guests were already gathering, chatting in hushed excitement about the wedding that promised to be the social event of the season. This was no ordinary celebration. It was the marriage of a prominent heiress from an old money family to the son of a powerful real estate magnate, an extravagant affair rumored to have cost millions. In the midst of this spectacle, Adrian Solis arrived with an air of quiet confidence. As the CEO of Solis Innovations, a tech giant that had revolutionized green energy solutions, he was accustomed to grand events and paparazzi-laced gatherings. Yet Adrian's subtle entrance betrayed a different side to him. Unlike other powerful moguls who demanded attention, he seemed almost at ease with slipping in discreetly, offering polite nods to acquaintances and the occasional half-smile to strangers. Dressed in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, Adrian stood out like a polished jewel. His wavy black hair caught the sunlight each time he turned his head to greet someone. Sharp features and an assured posture suggested power, but those who truly knew him understood there was more, a streak of thoughtfulness he rarely revealed to the media. The world saw him as the young prodigy who had guided his family's modest electronics venture into a billion-dollar empire. Today, though, business was the last thing on his mind. He was here as a courtesy, fulfilling a long-standing obligation to attend the wedding of an old university friend who had once helped him network with potential investors. Adrian scanned the lawn, noticing how the wealthy mingled effortlessly in their designer outfits. Soft, classical music floated from hidden speakers, weaving through the garden and guiding guests toward the main reception area. A whimsical string quartet, stationed near a tall fountain, played a lilting melody that glided through the topiary shrubs and dotted lanterns. He turned slightly, catching a glimpse of the bride in the distance, a pristine vision in lace, surrounded by fawning bridesmaids. There was a polished grace in the way she smiled, but also a flicker of anxiety that any bride might feel on her big day. Adrian was tempted to slip away before the ceremony to avoid the swirl of small talk, but a protocol officer had already spotted him and was waving politely, urging him to move closer to the front rows designated for high-profile guests. Meanwhile, close to the far edge of the garden, someone else was trying her best to go unnoticed. Eva Clark, a young woman who had been invited as a +1 by a distant cousin, pressed herself against the perimeter fence draped in ivy, feeling entirely out of place. She was not from the world of lavish balls and black-tie galas. Her life was simpler, unremarkable in the eyes of the glittering crowd that surrounded her. Eva had been reluctant to attend in the first place. She worked as a volunteer coordinator for a small nonprofit and spent most of her time in jeans and casual shirts. Yet her cousin had begged her to come, insisting that the wedding needed more warm bodies to fill out the massive guest list. Clad in a modest pastel pink dress that her best friend had helped her pick at a discount shop, Eva tried to calm the fluttering nervousness in her stomach. The extravagance, the exotic hors d'oeuvres on silver trays, the diamond jewelry flaunted at every turn, it all felt like a strange movie scene. She worried someone would ask her about her connection to the bride or groom, but so far everyone was too busy boasting about their next luxury vacation or latest stock portfolio. As the ceremony began, Eva carefully navigated the edges of the white chairs arranged for the guests. The officiant, an older man with a gentle voice, greeted the crowd from under the arch, praising the union that was about to unfold. Cellists and violinists accompanied the bride's entrance, and camera shutters clicked a steady rhythm. Eva finally found an empty seat near the back and sank into it with relief. The vows were heartfelt, the guests wiped away sentimental tears, and for a fleeting moment, Eva felt her anxieties dissolve into the spectacle of love. After the couple was declared husband and wife, thunderous applause erupted. White doves were released into the sky, a theatrical touch that prompted excited cheers from the onlookers. Eva clapped politely, half smiling at the extravagance, while Adrian, sitting in the front row, nodded in appreciation of the ceremony's tasteful orchestration. Soon the entire party adjourned to a sweeping reception tent by the estate's lake. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead while tables draped in pale gold linen formed neat rows across the emerald lawn. Servers zipped through the crowd with canapes and champagne flutes. Guests found their assigned tables, but in the swirl of activity, some ended up mingling outside of their designated spots. Adrian took a seat at a table shared with a few influential business partners, trying to stay engaged in their idle chatter about mergers and expansions. Yet his mind drifted elsewhere. The extravagance around him felt hollow tonight, a reflection of a life he had grown used to but did not entirely relish. He stared at the shimmering table centerpiece, an ornate sculpture of glass and orchids, and wondered how much it had cost, and how many practical community projects that same money could have funded. A fleeting pang of restlessness made him shift in his seat. Across the tent, Eva felt a similar sense of detachment. She had no assigned seat, as she was a last-minute +1. Instead, she floated near the perimeter of the tables, sipping water she'd requested from a busy waiter. An acquaintance at a nearby table beckoned her to come join them, but she was too shy to move forward into the swirl of opulent chatter. A swirl of movement announced that the newlyweds were about to begin their first dance. Everyone stood to watch, phones aloft, capturing the moment. The bride glided across the floor with a confident smile while her groom twirled her gently. The overhead chandeliers cast sparkling reflections on the polished dance floor. When the couple's dance ended, a lively tune began, and the MC encouraged all guests to join in. People surged onto the floor, laughing and clapping in excitement. Eager not to be singled out for her reluctance, Eva took a step back. In that same instant, a waiter carrying a large tray of empty champagne glasses accidentally backed into her. Trying to avoid the collision, Eva stumbled forward. In her attempt to keep balance, she tripped over the edge of the dance floor, arms flailing, straight into the path of a certain midnight blue-suited CEO. Adrian, who had just risen to greet someone, turned around at the exact wrong moment. He felt a jolt, then the weight of someone falling into his arms. Champagne glasses rattled around them. It happened so fast that he hardly processed the details, only that a young woman was now pressed against his chest, her face half hidden in embarrassment, her delicate perfume mingling with the subtle cologne he wore. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," Eva gasped, her cheeks flushing crimson as she realized she was practically hugging a total stranger. She quickly tried to pull away, feeling mortified. Adrian, momentarily startled, instinctively steadied her to prevent her from falling any further. For a second, neither moved. It was as if the entire party around them paused. The hush lasted only a moment, but in that fraction of time, something flickered in the space between them. She looked up, and their eyes met. Her breath caught in her throat, and his usual composure faltered. Guests around them, busy dancing and chatting, hadn't fully registered the mishap. But to Adrian, it felt like the world had zeroed in on this one small accident. The lights, the music, the swirl of conversation, they all dulled to a distant murmur. Eva finally managed to stand on her own, stepping back, mortified. I didn't see," she began, but words failed. She was acutely aware of the eyes of strangers turning their way now. She offered a clumsy curtsy of apology, cheeks burning. Adrian was the first to break the tension with a gentle smile. "No harm done," he said, his voice low but kind. "Are you all right?" She nodded, trying to recover her shattered composure. "I'm fine, just sorry. That was so clumsy of me." Before she could say anything else, the bride's father, an influential tycoon, happened to notice the commotion and walked over. He recognized Adrian instantly, greeting him with a warm handshake and effusive praises for Solus innovations. Adrian replied courteously, but his gaze kept drifting toward Eva, who stood a step behind, fiddling nervously with the hem of her dress, unsure if she was allowed to leave without looking even ruder. The father turned to Eva and inquired politely, "And you, my dear? Are you here with family?" As she tried to string together an answer, Adrian realized he did not want to see her vanish back into the crowd without so much as a name. Something about that accidental hug, so spontaneous, so genuine, had ignited a curiosity deep within him, and in that instant the unlikeliest chain of events was set into motion. A millionaire CEO, a shy young woman, and a once-in-a-lifetime spark born from the most ordinary mistake. "Care to join us at our table?" Adrian asked quietly, surprising even himself. The bride's father nodded approvingly, as if to say the invitation was seconded. Eva's heart thudded. She wanted the ground to swallow her, yet she couldn't deny the magnetism in Adrian's gaze. "Sure," she managed, voice trembling. Then, without fully understanding what was unfolding, she found herself walking alongside the man she had practically bowled over just moments ago, both uncertain, both oddly intrigued, and both entirely unprepared for how this small chance encounter would rewrite their fates. Eva could still feel her heart thrumming in her chest as she followed Adrian Solus and the bride's father across the gleaming dance floor. Only moments ago she had tripped and practically toppled into one of the wealthiest men in the country, a man so far from her usual orbit that she could scarcely wrap her mind around it. Each click of her modest heels against the floor felt louder than the wedding band's lively music. Her cheeks warmed again with embarrassment, replaying how she'd collided with him in front of so many eyes. Yet Adrian, cool and composed, guided her gently through the clusters of elegantly dressed guests. He offered a few polite smiles to acquaintances who tried to stop him for conversation, but he excused himself with the slightest tilt of his head, continuing toward an ornate table near the head of the reception tent. There, tall vases of fresh orchids flanked velvet-covered chairs. A gold-framed sign placed discreetly at the center read, "Reserved," a clear signal that only the highest echelons of invited society were meant to sit here. Eva swallowed hard, wondering if she truly belonged at that table. Nearby, a handful of men in tailored suits looked up, noticing Adrian's approach. Their gazes flickered with curiosity when they spotted Eva, a stranger who hardly fit the mold of a typical wedding VIP. As they rose to greet Adrian, she hovered awkwardly. She only had a second to consider sneaking away before the bride's father introduced her. "This is Eva Clark," he announced genially. "A friend of the family, as I understand. A bit of a run-in with Adrian, but we're all friends now." He chuckled, so pleased with his own joke that he didn't notice Eva's anxious expression. Adrian cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, Miss Clark will be joining us for a bit," he said. "I'm sure we can find an extra seat." One of the men, tall and broad-shouldered, dragged over an empty chair from a neighboring table. He dusted off a stray flower petal on the cushion, then gave Eva a short nod that she assumed was meant to be friendly. She sank down gingerly, hoping her hands wouldn't tremble too visibly. As a waiter circled by, Adrian asked for a fresh glass of champagne, then turned to Eva. "Would you like some too?" "Just water, please," she replied softly. I'm still recovering from that near collision." She attempted a laugh, but the memory only made her flush again. "You're welcome to settle your nerves," Adrian noted, arching a slight smile in her direction. "But water it is." The conversation at the table resumed almost immediately. Stock tips, expansions in Asia, philanthropic galas, the usual chatter that high-powered executives fell into as easily as breathing. One of them, a well-dressed older gentleman with silver hair and an impeccable posture, pressed Adrian about a rumored new product from Solus Innovations. What's this I hear about the advanced solar grid you're developing? The media is buzzing that it'll change how our cities manage sustainable energy. Adrian replied politely but succinctly, as though he'd given the same rehearsed lines a dozen times already that evening. Ava picked up a few words: scalable solutions, environmental impact, energy independence, all terms she had read in passing. She tried to follow along, but so many references flew by that she felt like an intruder in a conversation far above her pay grade. After a few minutes of this rapid-fire business banter, Adrian subtly glanced Eva's way. Seeing her tense posture, he leaned closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I can change the subject if it's putting you to sleep," he teased quietly. She let out a small laugh, grateful for the gentle break in tension. "I promise I'm not bored, just not used to talk of international investments and expansions. My cousin invited me here, and I'm afraid I don't quite fit in." "Why do you say that?" Adrian asked, genuinely curious. She hesitated. Was it wise to reveal her insecurities to a man she'd just met, especially in such a public setting? But something about Adrian's calm gaze disarmed her. "I suppose because this wedding feels like a foreign planet," she said. "Everything here costs more than I make in months. I'm not part of this scene, that's all." Adrian's expression softened. He seemed on the verge of replying when another executive interjected, leaning across the table to pat him on the shoulder. "Adrian, old friend, the father of the groom wants a word. Something about a partnership. If you hurry, you'll catch him before he's whisked away for photos." Adrian gave a cordial nod. Then he turned to Ava. "I'll be right back. Will you be okay here?" She shrugged, half smiling. "Sure. I'll just sip my water and try not to break any more champagne glasses." A fleeting amusement lit his eyes. "Sounds like a plan." With that, he rose and stepped away, quickly swallowed up by the throng of guests. Ava exhaled, suddenly feeling the weight of the table's stares. The conversation among the other men had shifted, and now she was keenly aware that she was the only woman in their circle. She stared down at her water glass, swirling it in her hands. One of the suited men, who looked like he might have been in his 50s, cleared his throat. "So, you're a friend of the bride's family?" he asked, kindly enough. "Not exactly," she said. "I'm here with my cousin, who's a distant relative of the bride. Sort of. It's complicated." Realizing how vague she sounded, Eva added, "I've never really traveled in these, business circles." He gave a curt nod. "No shame in that. A wedding's a wedding." He paused. "How did you meet Adrian?" She let out a nervous laugh. "I literally fell into him." A moment of startled silence. Then a few of them laughed, one or two in genuine amusement, others in a more baffled way. The older gentleman from earlier gave her a polite but quizzical look, as if uncertain whether she was joking. Thankfully, they didn't press any further. Instead, they resumed talking about an upcoming trade expo. Eva found her mind drifting, scanning the tent for some sign of her cousin. She spotted him across the room, happily chatting with a group near the buffet. She had half a mind to go join him and escape the nerve-wracking seat at the front table, but then she caught sight of Adrian weaving back through the crowd. He made eye contact with her, gave a slight tilt of his head, and smiled. Her heart fluttered, and she couldn't help but smile back. Was it the lights, the music, or just the warmth in his expression? Whatever the reason, Eva felt a tiny spark inside. How odd that a single moment of clumsiness had brought her here, sharing a table with a man like Adrian. She wondered if, in a different setting, say a coffee shop or a library, she would have had the courage to strike up a conversation with someone so accomplished, so imposing in his own quiet way. Adrian returned and reclaimed his seat, ignoring the remarks from his colleagues that this event felt more like a corporate summit than a wedding. He turned his attention back to Eva. "So," he asked, settling in, "did they bore you with talk of stock indexes in my absence?" She shrugged, trying to appear casual. "They were actually quite polite," she said. "But I am a fish out of water." Maybe a minnow in a shark tank, she joked. He seemed taken by that. You shouldn't underestimate yourself. Besides, not all sharks here bite. A flicker of a grin played on her lips. Good to know. The conversation lulled briefly, allowing the gentle rhythms of the music to fill their silence. On the dance floor, the newlyweds were taking photos with extended family members. Guests stood in line, waiting for their turn to greet the bride and groom. Waiters glided through the aisles with plates of delicacies, miniature quiches, smoked salmon bites, gourmet cheeses, offering them to guests who had grown hungry after hours of socializing. Eva reached for a small pastry, more out of restlessness than hunger. She bit into the flaky dough, tasting an unexpected but delightful combination of goat cheese and herbs. Meanwhile, Adrian quietly observed her, occasionally redirecting his gaze when their eyes met so as not to stare. "May I ask," he said softly, "what you do, Miss Clark, if that's not too personal?" Setting down her half-eaten pastry, Eva folded her hands in her lap. "I work for a small non-profit. We connect volunteers with environmental cleanup projects around the city." He nodded, genuinely interested. "That's impressive. You're doing something that directly helps communities. Not many can say that." "It's not a big charity, though," she clarified. "Mostly local efforts. We do small-scale cleanups, neighborhood garden projects, stuff like that. My job is to recruit and coordinate the volunteers, sometimes run basic fundraising drives. Honestly, we barely make enough to keep the lights on." Adrian appeared contemplative. "Still, it sounds important. Sometimes the greatest impact is on a smaller scale, right where people live." She felt an odd warmth from his words, a sense of being genuinely heard, which didn't happen often. "I believe so, yes. It's not glamorous work, but it matters to the people who see their parks and vacant lots transformed." Just then, the father of the bride returned to the table, beaming. "Adrian!" he exclaimed, lowering himself into a seat with a satisfied sigh. He greeted the others, then turned to Eva with a curious glint. "Are you entertaining our honored CEO, Miss Clark?" Eva smiled politely, not sure how to respond. Adrian intervened with a slight laugh. "She is indeed. In fact, I might owe her a dance later, if she's willing, of course." The bride's father patted Adrian on the shoulder, evidently pleased. "That's the spirit. This is a celebration after all. Go on, dance. So many young people these days ignore the floor, and where's the fun in that?" Adrian raised a brow at Eva. "The night is still young," he said. "Maybe after dinner you'd like to take a spin. I promise no more accidental collisions." She felt her cheeks flush at the idea. The thought of gliding across the floor with someone like Adrian, under the watchful eyes of so many wealthy and influential guests, made her both exhilarated and terrified. And yet, there was something magnetic about him, something that pulled her outside her comfort zone and whispered that, for once, it might be worth taking a chance. Before Eva could formulate an answer, a swirl of new arrivals demanded the bride's father's attention, pulling him away from the table again. The music shifted to a softer melody, allowing guests to enjoy dinner in a more relaxed atmosphere. Adrian's colleagues continued to chat among themselves, occasionally leaning in to include him, but he only gave them distracted nods. They were, for the moment, in their own small bubble, surrounded by a sea of embroidered gowns and endless chatter. Eva felt as if she were on the edge of an unexpected adventure, one she hadn't planned for, but one that beckoned with quiet promise. Through the tent's open flaps, she glimpsed strings of fairy lights illuminating the property's garden paths. Perhaps after dinner she'd walk along those paths, maybe alone, or maybe not. "Miss Clark," Adrian said, catching her gaze yet again, "if you decide to accept that dance, I'll be glad you did." She couldn't help but smile, eyes flickering toward the dance floor. The lights overhead glimmered like 1,000 tiny stars, reflecting all the possibilities that tonight held. "I'll think about it," she murmured. And for the first time since she arrived, the wedding's lavishness felt less intimidating and more enchanting. The reception tent glowed under the hush of twilight. Clustered chandeliers hanging from the vaulted canopy radiated warmth, illuminating the elegantly set tables where guests were settling in for the evening meal. A subtle hum of conversation wove through the air, occasionally punctuated by bursts of laughter as friends reminisced or teased the newlyweds. Servers in crisp uniforms glided between tables, placing dishes of seared fish, glazed vegetables, and delicate pastries before the attendees. Ava's nerves, which had temporarily subsided, surfaced again when a waiter placed a plate of gourmet cuisine in front of her. She wasn't used to multi-course meals, especially not ones that looked like art on fine porcelain. At her typical gatherings back home, family potlucks or volunteer dinners, food was served buffet-style on paper plates, comforting and unpretentious. Here, every detail felt carefully choreographed, down to the final garnish. Still, the aroma made her mouth water. Seated beside her, Adrian casually thanked the waiter for his dish, then turned to Ava. "It looks more like a sculpture than a meal, doesn't it?" His voice held a thread of playful amusement, as though he, too, recognized the extravagance. Ava nodded. "I'm half afraid to ruin its presentation." Then, she mustered a smile. "But I'm definitely going to eat it. I'm starving." "By all means," he urged with a grin, picking up his fork. The small talk at their end of the table flowed more freely now. One or two of Adrian's business acquaintances commented on how they'd missed out on the bride's legendary chocolate fountain from a previous family wedding, prompting an exchange of comedic anecdotes about wedding menu extravaganzas. Eva relaxed. She listened, occasionally contributing a shy remark, surprised that no one had made her feel unwelcome. A bit of her self-consciousness faded. After all, she had proven capable of sharing a table with powerful executives without causing a scene, aside from that one spectacular collision, of course. Halfway through the entree, the bride's father drifted by again, checking on VIP guests. He clapped Adrian on the shoulder in a friendly manner and glanced between him and Ava. "Enjoying yourselves?" he asked, his tone both cheerful and vaguely conspiratorial. "Absolutely," Adrian replied. "Beautiful event, as always." Ava echoed the sentiment. The father gave a satisfied nod, leaning closer. "I told the newlyweds you both might share a dance later. Make sure you do," he said, winking in Ava's direction. Then he was off, continuing to the next table, greeting dignitaries and friends with the same magnanimous air. Her cheeks warmed at the reminder of that earlier conversation about dancing. She cast Adrian a sidelong look, and he offered a gentle, reassuring smile. "No pressure," he said, "but if you're feeling brave after dessert, we can give it a try. I might have 2 left feet for all you know." She laughed softly. "That's difficult to picture, actually." He shrugged in good humor. "I'll let you judge for yourself." They resumed eating, sampling the variety of sauces, delicate seasonings, and fresh garnishes. Each bite was a revelation, though Ava had no idea what half the ingredients were called. From the corner of her eye, she could see Adrian's colleagues continuing their muted chatter about business expansions. Once or twice they turned to Adrian for a quick question or short commentary, and he responded politely, but he always drifted back to conversation with Ava. It felt a bit like a private bubble in the midst of a high-stakes networking gala. At one point she dared to ask him, "Do you attend a lot of events like this?" He paused, dabbing the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin. "More than I'd prefer," he admitted. "Being a CEO, people expect me to show up at fundraisers, corporate gatherings, weddings of important clients or partners. Sometimes it's good for building alliances, but it can get overwhelming." "Sounds exhausting," she murmured, swirling the water in her glass. He looked thoughtful, nodding. "It can be, but I try to remember that forging connections often leads to big opportunities, both for my company and for causes I care about." His gaze flickered toward her, as if hinting that non-profits like hers might one day benefit from the right kind of link. Eva felt a small spark of hope. Dare she mention her organization's constant search for funding? She hesitated, fearing to seem opportunistic. Does your company ever partner with local charities? For sustainability or volunteer initiatives, perhaps? A mild light came into his eyes. We do, he said, sounding perfectly open to the idea. We have a philanthropic division that invests in green energy awareness projects and community-building programs. It's a line we don't advertise aggressively. There's enough corporate boasting out there. He paused, then added, If your nonprofit has a project that aligns with our mission, I'd be happy to see if we can help. Warm gratitude filled her. Part of her mind cautioned her not to get too excited, but how could she not feel a rush at the idea of actual support? That would be incredible, she said softly. Even if it's just guidance. We struggle to get the word out sometimes. Adrian nodded. We can definitely talk. I'll put you in touch with one of my directors. Or I can offer what personal insight I can if that's useful. A playful spark returned to his smile. Assuming you don't mind associating with the man you tackled earlier. She laughed, shaking her head. I think I owe you more apologies for that. I won't hold it against you, he teased. On the contrary, I'm starting to think it was the highlight of my evening. Her cheeks flared with warmth at the compliment. For a moment, she let herself revel in the unexpected comfort she felt in Adrian's presence. If someone had told her that she'd discuss funding for her nonprofit with a high-powered CEO at a fancy wedding, she would have never believed it. But here she was, in the heart of a world she once considered impenetrable, sharing a playful conversation with a man known for his staggering successes. Life was strange and full of surprises. At last, the main course concluded. Waiters discreetly removed the plates, replacing them with dessert offerings. A rich chocolate mousse garnished with fresh raspberries, and petite confections shaped like roses. The wedding band struck up a gentle tune, inviting guests to come forward for a slower dance. Soft guitars and a violin thread coaxed couples onto the floor. Adrian lifted a brow, an unspoken question. Eva's heart thumped. She wasn't especially gifted at dancing, but something about the evening's fairy tale ambiance nudged her to say yes. Then, out of the blue, one of Adrian's acquaintances, a stout man with an air of proud confidence, leaned in. Adrian, I just spoke to the bride's father. He mentioned you're giving a toast, some words of congratulations. Everyone's eager to hear from you. Eva's head whipped around. She saw a flicker of resignation in Adrian's eyes. I offered my well wishes privately, but I suppose I could say a few words if that's what they want, he replied, carefully measured. He turned to Eva, a hint of apology in his voice. A quick detour? She nodded, understanding. Go for it. We have all night for me to humiliate myself on the dance floor. He laughed under his breath. Wait right here. Don't run off. Their table parted to let Adrian pass. He strode to the small raised platform near the band where a microphone was being set up. Eva was suddenly aware that half the tent's attention had shifted, anticipating some kind of speech from the CEO of Solus Innovations. She folded her hands in her lap, amazed at how natural he looked, stepping confidently onto the stage and turning to face the crowd. A hush descended. The bride and groom paused near the dance floor, curiosity brightening their faces. Eva took the moment to study Adrian's poise. Though she had only known him for a brief time, it was evident he was used to public speaking. He offered the newlyweds a warm smile, and for an instant, the lines of corporate seriousness vanished. He became simply a friend offering well wishes on a joyous day. Good evening, everyone, Adrian began, voice resonant and calm. I'll keep this short because frankly I know I stand between you and that dance floor, and possibly more of that excellent cake. A ripple of laughter greeted him. Many of you know the groom is an old friend of mine from our university days. Back then he was the one who introduced me to a few of my earliest investors, which eventually helped launch Solus Innovations. Murmurs passed through the guests, some smiling in recognition. So I owe him a tremendous thanks for believing in my wild ideas and for being a steadfast friend. As for our lovely bride," he turned graciously to the radiant woman in white, "I cannot imagine a more perfect partner for him. You bring out the best in each other." The bride leaned into her groom, eyes shimmering. The guests clapped politely. Adrian continued, "Weddings, I've learned, can be about forming alliances. But real love, as we see tonight, is about more than merging families or fortunes." He paused, scanning the crowd. "It's about finding that person who makes you want to keep dancing, even if you've stepped on their toes a few times." A light wave of laughter rippled again. "So, here's to your dance, and all the steps you'll take together. May they lead you to endless happiness." Applause broke out in earnest as Adrian concluded. He returned the microphone to its stand, nodding politely to the wedding band. Over the clamor, the bride's father gave a grand thumbs up, looking thoroughly pleased. Then, with the speech wrapped up, Adrian hopped off the platform and strode back toward Eva. She noticed a certain ease in his step, like he'd shed a weight. She clapped softly as he came closer. "That was really nice," she said. "A short, sweet speech." He shrugged lightly. "I try not to overstay my welcome on stage," he joked. "But I meant every word I said about real love being more than an alliance." She regarded him thoughtfully. Did that line carry a subtext that even he hadn't expected to reveal? "So, does that come from personal experience?" A fleeting, contemplative look crossed his face. "I'd like to think I'm still learning," he answered, "but I've seen enough marriages for convenience to know that's not what I want." Eva sensed the faintest undertone of yearning in his words. For all his success, Adrian might be as humanly vulnerable and hopeful for genuine connection as anyone else. The realization made her chest tighten with empathy, and something else more delicate and exciting. The wedding band struck up another tune, a classic ballad that signaled the dance floor was open again to couples. Adrian cocked his head in invitation. "Shall we?" Her pulse quickened. She glanced at the swirl of people on the floor. The bride dancing with her father, a pair of older relatives stepping in careful unison, the newlyweds' friends forming a small circle as they laughed and tried out silly moves. It was a mix of sophistication and playful abandon, and despite her unease, Eva couldn't help but smile. "All right," she whispered, standing. "But if I step on your toes, remember you asked for this." He offered his arm, leading her toward the center of the tent. A wave of hushed excitement fluttered through her stomach. Her mind reeled with thoughts of what others might say, seeing her, an unremarkable +1, in the arms of a famed CEO under the twinkling lights. Yet she allowed him to guide her, sliding one hand into his, the other resting lightly on his shoulder. The music eased them into a gentle sway. At first, Eva focused on matching his rhythm, praying she wouldn't stumble or misstep. But once they found a comfortable pace, her nerves began to melt. She felt the subtle press of Adrian's palm against hers, the quiet strength in his posture, the sense of trust that bloomed in that small circle of space they shared. For all the grandeur around them, crystal chandeliers, swirling gowns, wealthy onlookers, something intimate and true enclosed just the two of them. A sense of serenity enveloped them. Their eyes met, and a mutual unspoken understanding passed between them, that this single dance, this accidental meeting, might be the start of something that neither had anticipated. He smiled, and she smiled back, heart fluttering wildly in her chest. The swirl of well-dressed guests around them blurred. The music seeped into the background, as though their private bubble of serenity had muffled everything else. Eva's mind spun with questions. Who is Adrian truly? Why does being in his arms make her feel so weightless? Would this improbable connection last beyond the wedding lights and ephemeral glamour? But for this moment, she let her thoughts subside, surrendering to the enchantment of the evening and the unexpected spark between them. They continued gliding across the floor until the final note of the ballad faded into a burst of applause. Reluctantly, they broke apart, clapping politely along with everyone else. However, as they stood there, faces aglow, hearts drumming, both realized that this dance was more than just a courtesy. It was a promise of possibilities waiting to be explored. Long after the waltz ended and the wedding band shifted to more upbeat tunes, Ava still felt the gentle phantom of Adrian's hand around hers. The soft glow of twinkle lights overhead only heightened the lingering electricity that hung between them. Around them, guests drifted toward the dessert tables or strolled the manicured grounds for fresh air, but Ava and Adrian remained near the edge of the dance floor, quietly marveling at the moment they'd just shared. Eventually, another wave of couples swarmed the floor for a lively dance number. Adrian leaned closer, voice low to be heard above the music. "Shall we step outside for a moment? It's getting rather warm in here." Eva nodded, her heart fluttering at the thought of strolling in the estate's vast gardens under the moonlit sky. She let him guide her away from the dancing throng. A few curious eyes followed their exit, but Adrian seemed unbothered by the attention. The tent's open flap led them onto a cobbled path lined with flickering lanterns. Beyond it, the garden sprawled. Rows of ornamental trees, charming stone benches, and a wide lake whose surface shimmered with the reflection of starlight. They walked in companionable silence for a minute, inhaling the cool night air. A gentle breeze rustled the ornate shrubs, carrying faint echoes of laughter from the reception. Ava felt a pleasant calm mingled with the warm thrill of Adrian's presence. It all felt surreal. Just a few hours ago, she hadn't even wanted to attend this wedding, convinced she wouldn't belong. Now she was gliding through a moonlit garden on the arm of a man whose every move exuded quiet strength and surprising warmth. They reached a small courtyard at the garden's center, where a stone fountain trickled softly. Here the lanterns were spaced more widely, creating pockets of shadow and silvery light. Adrian halted, turning to face her. The overhead sky was clear, and the hush of the evening formed a cushion around them, as though granting permission to speak freely. "So," he began with a wry smile, "that dance was far less clumsy than our first encounter." She laughed softly, cheeks flushed. "I'd like to think I'm a little more graceful when I'm not dodging a waiter." "You definitely are," he said, the corner of his mouth tilting up. "I enjoyed it. It's not often I get to dance without 100 colleagues trying to corner me about corporate ventures. Or wedding guests hoping to mention their startup ideas," she teased, recalling how the bride's father had insisted on him giving a speech. Adrian's expression relaxed into genuine mirth. "Yes, believe me, I've had countless nights of that. But tonight feels different." He hesitated, as though carefully choosing his words. "I enjoy having a real conversation with someone who isn't trying to pitch me something." His eyes glinted with sincerity. Ava felt her heart stir at the notion that a man so affluent might crave the simplest of connections. Conversations that weren't transactional or clouded by ambition. She thought of her own modest life, the small apartment she shared with a roommate, the second-hand car she used to ferry volunteers to their service sites. It was a world away from Adrian's, but for the first time, that gap didn't feel so daunting. He turned slightly, looking at the fountain. "Do you think you'll stay long tonight? Or do you have to get back early?" Eva shrugged lightly. "I didn't have concrete plans. My cousin is probably still inside, working through the buffet and dancing up a storm. I have a volunteer meetup tomorrow morning, but that's not until 10. "Tomorrow morning," Adrian echoed, as if filing that detail away. Then he took a small step forward. "If you can spare a moment, I might like to hear more about your work." She lifted her gaze, intrigued. "Really?" "Truly," he said, then smiled in a more self-conscious way than she'd seen before. "I don't want to come across as purely business-minded, but the fact that you coordinate environmental cleanup volunteers fascinates me. My own philanthropic team funds large-scale sustainability projects, but there's something vital about smaller grassroots efforts. They can spark real change in local communities. Encouraged, Ava explained how her organization identified neglected parks and trash-littered corners in urban neighborhoods, rallying locals to reclaim those spaces. She recounted challenges too, persuading businesses to sponsor supplies, motivating volunteers in harsh weather, dealing with local bureaucracy. Adrian listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed a strategic insight into how such initiatives could be scaled up or made more efficient. For a moment, she forgot where they were, forgot the opulent setting and the star-studded wedding. She felt as if she were simply sharing her passion with someone who truly valued it. Adrian had a way of focusing on her words that made her feel deeply heard. "You have a genuine passion for what you do," he observed once she paused for breath. "It's refreshing." She laughed softly. "It's exhausting sometimes, but fulfilling. I wish we had more resources, but, well, you make do with what you have." He paused, expression turning thoughtful. "If you'd like, I can connect you to a friend in our philanthropic division. They're always scouting for innovative local groups to support. Or, if you're comfortable, we can keep discussing possibilities, maybe even arrange a meeting. I don't want to overstep, but if it helps your cause, I'd be happy to do it." Her chest fluttered with gratitude. "It would help a lot," she admitted quietly. "Thank you." His returning smile was warm, laced with that intangible spark. Beneath the hum of crickets, a hush fell over the courtyard. Eva felt a current of emotions she could barely name. She caught herself wondering what might happen when they parted ways tonight. Would they keep in touch, or would reality seep in, pulling them back to separate worlds? As if sensing her shifting thoughts, Adrian gestured to a stone bench near the fountain. They sat, leaving polite space between them. The fountain's gentle burble filled the pause, along with faint strains of music drifting from the tent. "Ava," he ventured, turning slightly, "I'm grateful we met tonight." Unexpected as it was, she offered a small, almost shy nod. "Me too." He exhaled softly, gazing at the water. Sometimes, when you least expect it, life throws you into someone's path. Quite literally, in our case. A wry grin lit his face. "I've been so consumed by my work for years now, I never paused to wonder if maybe there's more out there to discover. More than expansions, profits, or brand building." The admission made her heart ache with empathy. She could sense the layers of pressure he endured. "You have a massive responsibility," she acknowledged, "but you also have a chance to influence the world in a positive way. That's rare." He nodded, his gaze flicking from the fountain back to her. "Exactly, and it's not something I take lightly, but I sometimes question if I've let my personal life slip by. Wedding invitations, social gatherings, it all blurs into an obligation. Yet tonight reminded me that there can be meaning in these social events, if you find the right person to talk to." A warmth suffused Eva's cheeks. She attempted a gentle nudge of humor to lighten the moment. "Well, at least you'll have a good story to tell, how you nearly got knocked over by a volunteer coordinator." He chuckled. "It's the best wedding story I've had in a while." Then, as though steeling himself, he straightened. "I don't want to keep you from your cousin or your volunteer duties tomorrow, so I won't monopolize all your time. But before we return, might I ask for your number? That way, I can properly follow up about your organization. And perhaps if you're open to it, we can talk beyond business." Her heart fluttered anew. She could hardly believe that the brilliant, elusive Adrian Solis, the man whose name regularly appeared in headlines, was shyly requesting her number. "Yes," she said softly, rummaging in her small purse for a pen. She scrawled her phone number on a tiny scrap of paper. "I don't have a fancy business card, sorry." He accepted the note with a smile. Handwritten is far more personal anyway. They stood then, reluctant to break the spell of the peaceful courtyard. But the wedding hustle beckoned in the distance, reminding them of reality. As they ambled back along the lantern-lit path, Eva felt a subtle shift. No longer was she just a +1 hovering at the fringes of a grand event. She was someone. Someone who had unexpectedly caught the eye of a man who usually kept a fortress around his life. Their return to the reception tent felt dreamlike. The lively music, the swirl of laughter and clinking glasses were the same as when they left, yet everything seemed different now, more vivid. Perhaps because she and Adrian carried between them a spark of new possibility. Near the entrance, they paused. Adrian's acquaintances spotted him, beckoning with a wave, perhaps wanting to discuss something trivial or pressing. Eva's cousin, across the tent, motioned for her to join his rowdy circle near the dance floor. A moment of decision floated between them. Did they part ways now, or continue roaming the night side by side? Adrian took her hand briefly, giving it a light squeeze. "I'll let you go find your cousin," he murmured. "I should answer some obligations, but don't leave without saying goodbye." Her chest tightened with a sweet pang. "I won't," she promised, stepping back. With a lingering smile, she let him go, weaving through the crowd toward her cousin's table. Even from a distance, she could sense Adrian's gaze follow her for a moment before turning away to greet the men who flagged him down. Her cheeks warmed once again. Tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, she mulled over how quickly everything had changed. Tonight's chance encounter might be nothing more than a fleeting memory, or it might be the start of a future she never dared imagine. She resolved that she would not let the clock strike midnight on this feeling without a proper farewell, because if their brief exchange had taught her anything, it was that sometimes, to discover extraordinary things, you have to accept life's unexpected invitations, even if they begin with a clumsy accident at a wedding. Eva joined her cousin's table, greeted by friendly chaos. People were mid-conversation about the wedding's grandiose details, the bride's luxurious dress, the lavish flower arrangements, and of course the bottomless flow of champagne. Amid the din, her cousin Richard, a gregarious, quick-to-laugh man in his late 20s, patted the seat next to him. "There you are!" he exclaimed, his voice thick with convivial excitement. "I was beginning to think you'd vanished into the night." "No such luck," Eva quipped, lowering herself onto the chair. Despite the swirl of chatter around her, she couldn't help but notice how different this space felt compared to her moments with Adrian. She was still at the same wedding, surrounded by the same music and food, yet a subtle shift inside her made the atmosphere both more vivid and strangely surreal. Richard leaned closer, handing her a small slice of cake. "Here, I saved you some. It's from the groom's chocolate tier masterpiece." "Wow, thanks." She forked a bite. The rich confection dissolved on her tongue, but her thoughts drifted to the swirl of feelings left by her conversation with Adrian in the garden. She glanced across the tent, half expecting to see him. Instead, she spotted him at a nearby table, politely engaged with a cluster of people in sharp suits. He gave them respectful attention, but occasionally his gaze flickered around as if searching for something or someone. Richard caught the direction of her gaze. A knowing smirk curved his lips. "So, that's how it is," he teased. Eva felt her face heat. "What do you mean?" "Don't play coy," he said, swirling the last sip of his champagne. "You and Mr. Tall, Dark, and Loaded have been the talk of the evening. Half the guests saw you two dancing and then you disappeared together. Now he keeps looking over at you like you hung the moon." She swallowed, feigning nonchalance. "He's just being nice. We were talking about philanthropic stuff." Richard burst into laughter. "Right. Philanthropic stuff, if that's what the kids call it these days." Rolling her eyes, Eva tried to hide a self-conscious smile. "Come on, you know me. I'm not exactly strutting around in high society circles looking for a billionaire boyfriend." His expression softened. "No, I know that, Evie. That's why I think this is interesting. Surprising, even. I've never seen you grin like that at a fancy party." She shrugged, playing with a crumb of cake on her plate. Was she grinning? Her cheeks hurt from the number of shy smiles she'd fought to contain. "We'll see," she said quietly, not wanting to gush or jump to conclusions. She barely knew Adrian after all. Yet the possibility that flickered between them lit a tiny flame of optimism in her chest. Sensing her introspection, Richard turned the conversation to a lighter note, joking about an older relative who'd drunk a bit too much champagne and was now trying to teach the younger guests the tango. Eva giggled along with him, throwing occasional glances around the tent. But as much as she loved her cousin's playful banter, her mind drifted inevitably to Adrian. Eventually, the DJ announced the start of a final round of toasts. As the bride and groom stepped forward to thank everyone, the chatter simmered down, and waiters circled with fresh glasses of champagne for those who wanted to raise a glass. Richard handed Eva a flute of sparkling cider instead, knowing she preferred not to drink. She accepted it gratefully. Standing at the center of the dance floor, the newlyweds glowed with happiness. The bride's hair, pinned in elaborate curls, shimmered under the string lights. The groom, a confident grin on his face, wrapped an arm around his bride's waist. They both looked out over their assembled family and friends. In heartfelt words, they expressed gratitude for the support, the love, and the presence of everyone who had made this day memorable. The crowd erupted in applause. As if by silent consensus, couples began to pair off once again. The music returned, soft, slow, evocative. Enough guests were leaving or chatting on the sidelines that the dance floor grew less congested, a more intimate space for those who remained. Eva found herself sipping the last of her cider, listening to the gentle chords and remembering the earlier dance with Adrian, the feel of his hand in hers, the closeness, the swirl of possibility. As if summoned by her memory, she noticed a motion at the corner of her eye. Adrian was approaching, weaving through the lingering guests with an air of self-assured grace. His suit jacket was unbuttoned now, perhaps from the late hour or the warmth, and his tie slightly loosened. The sight made him appear more accessible, less the high-powered CEO, and more a man simply enjoying the night. "Eva," he said with a smile, coming to stand beside her chair. "Am I interrupting?" She glanced at Richard, who flicked a playful eyebrow and made a point of sliding his chair back. "By all means," he teased. "I'll leave you two to your philanthropic affairs." Eva fought a laugh as Richard sauntered off, winking at her. Adrian tilted his head slightly, curiosity lacing his gaze. "Philanthropic affairs?" She sighed in mock exasperation. It's just his way of teasing. Adrian nodded, then swept his gaze around. The wedding was winding down. Some older relatives had already left, and the younger crowd was either dancing or perched around the open bar. "May I steal you for one last dance?" he asked, offering his hand. A flutter warmed her stomach. "I'd like that." She slipped her hand into his, and they ventured back onto the softly lit dance floor. The band had transitioned to a gentle melodic ballad that held just enough rhythm to sway in a close circle. Adrian settled one hand lightly at her waist. She rested hers on his shoulder, letting the other remain intertwined with his. The music wove around them, hush-like and tender. They danced in a comfortable silence at first. Outside the tent, she glimpsed the moon perched high above the estate, silvering the edges of the night sky. Each subtle shift of Adrian's movement guided her gracefully across the floor. She was aware of the subtle distance they maintained, a polite reserve in the closeness. Yet beneath that veneer, she sensed a crackle of unspoken longing. "I'm leaving soon," he confessed quietly, "but I didn't want to go without saying goodbye." There was a trace of regret in his tone, as if time had run out faster than he'd hoped. Eva nodded against his shoulder. "Me too. My cousin's driving me home. I think he's nearly ready to call it a night." A pang twinged her chest. She hadn't realized how reluctant she felt to see the evening end. "Thank you for everything." He turned his head slightly, enough that she caught the faint trace of his cologne, woodsy, warm. "Don't thank me yet," he murmured. a hint of laughter under his breath. We haven't fully explored all the philanthropic affairs we might get into. She smiled. I'll hold you to that. They lapsed into silence again, letting the music speak. For a few blissful minutes, the rest of the world dissolved. The business suits, the elaborate centerpieces, the lofty discussions. All that remained was a gentle dance shared by two people suspended in a moment that felt more significant than either dared say. Gradually, the ballad ended, and applause sprinkled the air. They stepped apart, hands lingering for an extra heartbeat. Adrian exhaled softly. I suppose this is good night, then. Will you be staying in town long? She ventured. She wasn't sure if it was too forward a question, but her curiosity got the better of her. He offered a small shrug. For a few days, yes. Then I have to visit our Hong Kong branch. But let's meet soon, before I leave. We could talk about your nonprofit or just talk. The words carried an unspoken hope. Eva's pulse quickened. This was it, the intangible path forward. She nodded. I'd like that. She felt Adrian gently squeeze her hand one last time. Then, as though coming to a silent agreement, they headed to gather their belongings. The bride's father intercepted Adrian near the exit, presumably to thank him again for attending and for his speech. Meanwhile, Eva retrieved her small purse from the table, exchanging goodnights with a few acquaintances. Finally, she stepped outside the tent, where the crisp night air made her shiver. Richard was already waiting by his car, yawning. Ready, Evie? I'm wiped. She glanced around, catching a glimpse of Adrian, who was now speaking to a pair of older men near the wedding's valet station. He lifted his gaze just in time to see her, and they shared a brief, meaningful smile. With a subtle nod of farewell, he turned back to his conversation. Eva couldn't help a soft pang of disappointment that they hadn't managed a more formal goodbye. Yet the reciprocal gaze they exchanged felt like enough, an acknowledgement that this evening's spark wouldn't fade with the dawn. She climbed into Richard's car and they pulled away from the estate, winding down a long driveway framed by stately oaks. In the rearview mirror, she watched the dazzling tent lights shrink into the distance until they disappeared around a curve. Sighing, she leaned her head against the seat, letting her thoughts swirl with all that had transpired. The wedding had been like a dream, a breathtaking swirl of elegance, complete with an unexpected life-altering collision. As the car headed back into the city's more familiar streets, Eva's mind spun with possibilities. Would Adrian truly call? Would they find a chance to meet again? It all felt precarious, yet thrilling. She held tight to the memory of the warmth in his voice, the sincerity in his eyes, and the gentle reassurance of his touch on the dance floor. Richard shot her a mischievous glance. So, are you going to give me details, or do I have to beg? She scoffed through a laugh. There's nothing to tell, other than we talked about potential sponsorship for my environmental projects. He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Sure. And that's all? She bit her lip, a shy grin betraying her. Well, we connected. He gave a triumphant chuckle. Aha, I knew it. It's written all over your face. You like him. Her cheeks blazed. I'm curious, yes, he's surprising. Different from the impression I'd get of some fancy CEO. There's more soul to him than I expected. But let's not get carried away, she cautioned gently. A dance, some conversation, that's all. Richard nodded, though a twinkle in his eye suggested he believed otherwise. Just promise me you won't let a good thing slip by because you're scared. You deserve a shot at something grand, Evie. She felt a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. Adrian's life was huge. Global expansions, corporate responsibilities, a world far beyond her humble sphere. Yet she recalled how present he'd been, how intently he'd listened to her passions, how sincere he sounded about wanting to help her nonprofit. Maybe, just maybe, their worlds could overlap more smoothly than she feared. As they turned onto her street, she made a small, silent vow. She would trust the instincts that had guided her tonight. She wouldn't let cynicism or fear overshadow what could be a genuine connection. Tomorrow, she'd return to her volunteer schedule. But soon, hopefully, she'd see Adrian again, and the seeds of something new would have the chance to grow. The car finally pulled up to her modest apartment building. She stepped out, thanking Richard with a playful shove for his endless teasing. Standing on the curb, she caught a glimpse of the city lights flickering in the distance. Somewhere across town, Adrian was likely returning to a five-star hotel or perhaps a swanky penthouse. Yet the memory of his handshake, his warm laughter, and the magnetic pull in his eyes made him feel surprisingly close. Eva went inside, the night's hush following her into the quiet hallway. In her small bedroom, she kicked off her heels, exhaling in relief. She turned on a single lamp, rummaging for her phone. No new messages. Of course not. It was too soon. She set the phone down, heart throbbing in a pleasant ache of anticipation, and let herself sink onto the bed. She couldn't help smiling. Tonight had been more than she ever dreamed a wedding could be. And though the future was uncertain, she felt an almost buoyant excitement in not knowing precisely what would come next. Because somewhere out there, Adrian Solis carried a small scrap of paper with her number, and a promise hovered in the air. A promise to talk again, to explore both philanthropic connections and possibly something deeper. That thought warmed her as she drifted off, still dressed in her pastel pink wedding attire, thinking that sometimes the most extraordinary beginnings arise from accidental collisions on a dance floor. The next morning dawned with a crisp sky and gentle sunshine streaming through Eva's bedroom curtains. A series of muffled city sounds seeped in. Distant honks, a dog barking, the hum of a bus passing by. Sitting up, Eva stretched her arms overhead, blinking away the remnants of sleep. Her pastel pink dress hung over the chair where she had draped it, a visual reminder that the previous night's events had not been merely a dream. In its place, she pulled on a comfortable t-shirt and jeans, standard fare for a morning of volunteer coordination. She tied her hair into a loose ponytail and glanced at her phone, half hoping for a message from Adrian. None. She tried not to let the tinge of disappointment ruin her buoyant mood. Early days, she murmured to herself with a small smile. She'd told him she had a volunteer meetup and presumably he had his own obligations. Still, as she grabbed a quick breakfast of cereal and yogurt, her mind replayed the swirl of last night. The dance, the garden conversation, his promise to help. Could it really be the start of something real? By 9:30 a.m. she was out the door, heading to a local park where a small group of volunteers planned to meet. Today's task? Clearing debris from a neglected playground, pulling weeds and repainting parts of an old gazebo. While not glamorous, it was exactly the kind of community service she believed in, visible improvements that neighbors could appreciate. The park sat at the edge of a lower-income district where budgets for maintenance often fell short. Eva arrived to find a few volunteers already waiting. Mr. Rosenthal, a retired schoolteacher who had been active in the group for years, Tasha, a high-energy university student who juggled part-time jobs and still found time to volunteer, and Cam, a middle-aged father who brought his 2 kids along. They greeted Eva with friendly waves. "Morning, everyone," she called, unlocking the trunk of her old car. She handed out gloves, garbage bags, paint rollers, and metal scrapers. "Thanks for coming out. We'll tackle the trash around the benches first, then we can split up, some of us painting, others weeding." The air rang with the sound of rustling plastic as they organized supplies. Under Eva's gentle leadership, they fanned out across the worn playground. Cam and his kids started picking up litter, while Tasha knelt to uproot clumps of weeds around the gazebos. Mr. Rosenthal adjusted his glasses and took on the peeling paint near the playground slides. Eva herself joined in with a trash bag, scanning for leftover cups, wrappers, or broken bottles. An hour passed with steady work. She sweated lightly under the warming sun but found comfort in the sense of collective effort. Bits of laughter broke up the otherwise quiet atmosphere. Tasha joked about an odd piece of junk she discovered. Cam's kids tried to guess which color they'd paint the gazebo. Eva encouraged them with easy smiles, heartening them to stay motivated. Halfway through the morning, Eva took a quick water break and pulled her phone from her pocket. No missed calls or new texts. She swallowed a flicker of disappointment. It was silly to expect immediate contact from Adrian Solis. He likely had 1,000 pressing tasks. Resolving not to be disheartened, she tucked the phone away and returned to picking up cigarette butts by the curb. Eventually, the group reconvened under the shade of a tree to distribute sandwiches Eva had brought. The conversation drifted to weekend activities, local events, and the plan for next Saturday's cleanup. Tasha asked Eva about potential new sponsors. "We could sure use better gardening tools," she pointed out. "Mine are basically from a dollar store." Eva hesitated, glancing at the ground. "I'm actually working on a lead," she said carefully. "Nothing concrete yet, but there's a CEO I met who's interested in hearing about our projects." Mr. Rosenthal raised his eyebrows, intrigued. Well, that sounds promising. The more allies, the better." She smiled. "We'll see. I'll keep you updated." They finished lunch and the conversation moved on. But inside, Eva felt a small surge of determination. She wanted to prove to her volunteers, and to herself, that last night's conversation with Adrian could translate into tangible support. Of course, she also wanted to see him again on a personal level. But perhaps the philanthropic angle provided a less fraught reason to stay in contact. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of productivity. By the time they'd cleared all the debris and given the gazebo a fresh coat of paint, the playground looked significantly more welcoming. Kids from the neighborhood even ventured in, testing the slides, one boy calling "thank you" as he raced past. Moments like these reminded Eva why she poured her heart into these projects. After waving goodbye to each volunteer, Eva stacked the leftover supplies into her trunk. Aching but pleased, she slid behind the wheel and checked her phone again, a habit she couldn't quite resist. This time, a small thrill coursed through her veins. There was a text message from an unknown number. Her heart skipped as she read, "Unknown. Hi, Ava, it's Adrian. Hope I'm not interrupting your volunteer meetup. If you're free later today, I'd love to catch up, maybe discuss how my philanthropic team could get involved with your group. Let me know." A wide grin broke across her face. She typed a quick reply, hands trembling slightly with excitement. "Ava, hi. Just finished cleaning up a local park. Free the rest of the afternoon. Let me know what works for you." She buckled up, started the car, and pulled out of the park, adrenaline buzzing. Within minutes, her phone chimed again. "Adrian. Great. I'm heading into a short meeting soon, but maybe after 4 p.m. I can come to your side of town. There's a cafe on Jefferson, I remember. Does that work?" Eva's grin grew broader. The cafe on Jefferson wasn't fancy, just a cozy corner place with decent coffee. His willingness to come there warmed her. "Eva, that's perfect. See you at 4? His confirmation soon followed, accompanied by a friendly, "Looking forward to it." By the time she reached her apartment, Eva felt an urgent swirl of anticipation. She hopped into a quick shower, washing away sweat and grime from the morning's labor. Her hair, still a bit damp, she styled loosely around her shoulders. As she rummaged through her closet, she realized she had no idea what to wear to a casual coffee with a billionaire. But something told her it was best to stay true to herself. In the end, she slipped on a simple sundress, light blue with a small floral pattern, and comfortable sandals. She wasn't out to impress him with fancy labels. On the other hand, she wanted to feel confident, so she added a delicate necklace, a small charm her mother had given her years ago. Glancing in the mirror, she took a breath. "Okay, you can do this," she murmured. The cafe was about 10 minutes away. She parked around 3:50, giving herself a moment to settle her nerves. The place was cozy and eclectic. Exposed brick walls, local artwork for sale, potted plants adding warmth. Through the windows, she saw a handful of patrons scattered at tables, sipping lattes or tapping on laptops. No sign of Adrian yet. She chose a small table near the back, away from the bustle at the counter. Her phone displayed 3:55. She tried not to look at the door every other second. A swirl of excitement warred with a twinge of anxiety. Would he come alone, or bring a staff member? Would this feel like a strict business meeting, or something more? Precisely at 4:00, the front door opened, and in he walked. Eva's breath hitched. Adrian wore a casual collared shirt and dark jeans. No tie, no expensive suit jacket. His hair, impeccably styled last night, was a bit more relaxed today. Spotting her, he offered an easy smile and approached, greeting her with a light touch on her arm. "You made it," she said, standing to meet him. "Thanks for coming." He nodded, glancing around. "Thanks for suggesting this place. It's nice, much cozier than the usual corporate cafes I visit." They settled into chairs across from each other, the cafe's low hum of conversation providing a comfortable backdrop. A friendly barista ambled over. Adrian asked for a cappuccino. Eva requested an iced tea. When the barista left, Adrian leaned forward, forearms resting on the table. "So, how was your volunteer cleanup? Successful?" She brightened. "Yes, actually. We tackled an abandoned playground, and by the end, kids were already playing on the slides. It's a small victory, but it feels good." "That's wonderful," he said, sincerity lighting his eyes. "I'd love to see it sometime." Her heart flipped. "You're welcome anytime. Honestly, we do these meetups every weekend. Everyone is so dedicated, even the older folks. It means a lot to them, bringing life to their neighborhood." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your organization seems to capture exactly what corporate-funded charities sometimes miss. Real engagement with communities. That's what I want to support. Not just tossing money at a problem, but strengthening the bond between people and their environment." Their drinks arrived, and they each took a moment to sip. Eva relished the tangy sweetness of her tea, while Adrian hummed a small note of approval at his cappuccino. Clearing her throat, she carefully broached the business side. "About your philanthropic division, are there specific goals or criteria they consider when choosing local nonprofits to fund?" Adrian set his cup down. "They do have a structured vetting process, mostly to ensure accountability and track outcomes. But in principle, if your group has a clear mission, like environmental and community improvement, and can outline how additional funds would amplify its impact, they're likely to be interested. I could schedule a meeting with our philanthropy director, maybe next week, if that suits you." Eva nodded quickly, excitement sparking. "That'd be incredible. I can prepare some proposals." He smiled. "Don't stress too much. They'll want to see genuine work, not polished corporate gloss. Just show them what you've done, your plans, your track record with volunteers. I'll put in a strong word. I truly believe in what you're doing." Her gratitude swelled. "Adrian, you have no idea how much this means. We've struggled for a long time. Even a small grant could let us buy better tools, rent equipment, maybe even expand to other neighborhoods." He reached across the table, lightly tapping her hand. "I'm glad to help. And I'm also glad for an excuse to see you again." His voice softened at the last part, sincerity shining through the business talk. Heat rose to her cheeks. She played with the rim of her glass. "I'm glad too," she admitted. "It felt a bit surreal last night, meeting like that. I didn't want it to just vanish with the sunrise." A thoughtful hush settled between them. Outside, a car rumbled past. Inside, a small group of friends giggled near the bar. But in their corner of the cafe, time felt momentarily suspended. Adrian's gaze held hers, a gentle current of warmth passing between them. He broke the silence with a half-smile. "I'm not sure what your schedule looks like, but if you have time after this, perhaps we could walk around the neighborhood. I'd love to see more of the area you serve, or if you're busy—" "No, that'd be great," she cut in, smiling. "I can show you the park we worked on this morning. It's only a few blocks away." "Perfect," he said, relief flickering in his expression. "It'll be nice to be outdoors without all the wedding fanfare." Ava's heart did a small somersault. They'd slide seamlessly from philanthropic conversation into a casual stroll, bridging formality and personal connection. "Let's do it," she agreed, finishing the last of her iced tea. They wrapped up, Adrian insisting on paying despite Eva's half-hearted protests. Then they stood, exchanging smiles that carried a promise of further closeness. The front door chimed as they stepped out together into the sunny afternoon, ready to explore the neighborhood that Eva called home, and perhaps to explore the unfolding possibilities between them. They left the cafe side by side, stepping into a bright afternoon framed by a row of brick storefronts and small businesses. The sidewalk was alive with the bustle of weekend shoppers and the scent of freshly baked bread drifting from a nearby bakery. Adrian paused momentarily, taking in the surroundings, the chipped lampposts, the colorful murals on the sides of old buildings, the families pushing strollers along cracked pavement. Compared to the polished, upscale neighborhoods he frequented, this area felt lived in, spirited, yet in need of investment. Ava tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's a bit rough around here," she said, noticing him survey the worn facades and uneven sidewalks. "But there's a lot of heart in this community. People rally for each other. That's why I'm so attached to it." He turned to her with a thoughtful nod. "I can see that. Places like this usually have a strong sense of identity. Sometimes all they lack are resources to match their pride." He gestured for her to lead the way. "Shall we head to the park you mentioned?" She smiled, stepping into a comfortable stride, and Adrian matched her pace. They navigated a few street corners, crossing at crosswalks that bore fading paint. A local grocery store displayed stacks of fresh fruits outside, and an older woman in a floral apron sold homemade tamales from a cart on the corner, calling out to passers-by. Eva waved, exchanging a friendly greeting in Spanish. Adrian's eyebrows lifted with polite curiosity. "Do you speak Spanish?" "Some," Eva replied. "My mom's side of the family is from Puerto Rico, so I learned it growing up. It helps a lot in coordinating volunteers since many residents here speak Spanish as their first language." He gave an approving nod. "That's impressive. My language skills barely extend beyond basic pleasantries in French. I really should learn more, especially if I want to connect genuinely with local communities worldwide." They continued down the block, the conversation flowing easily. A teenage girl zoomed past on a scooter, giggling as she nearly collided with a friend. Adrian stepped aside to let them pass, flashing a quick smile. It struck Ava how seamlessly he fit into this everyday scene. No entourage, no formality, just a man in casual clothes exploring an ordinary neighborhood. If any passers-by recognized him as the CEO who often appeared in business headlines, they gave no sign of it. Before long, they reached the park. Framed by an old wrought-iron fence, it was neither large nor pristine, but it stood out as an oasis of green amid the concrete. Through the entrance arch, Eva spotted the newly repainted gazebo gleaming softly in the sunlight. A few children chased each other around the playground, the bright slides and swings recently scrubbed of graffiti. One of the kids, possibly recognizing Eva from that morning, gave a quick wave before darting off to join the others. "It already looks inviting," Adrian observed, stepping in beside her. He surveyed the trimmed grass and areas where volunteers had cleared debris. Though the lawn wasn't perfect, patches of worn dirt still showed. The overall transformation was evident. "Hard to believe you guys accomplished this in just a few hours." Ava's chest warmed with pride. "We had a small but determined crew. Cam brought his kids to help, and Tasha's an amazing painter. Honestly, we do what we can with limited resources. Sometimes we get small donations of paint, or local shops pitch in, but often Volunteers bring their own supplies from home. Adrian rested a hand on the fence, thoughtful. If we can formalize a partnership, maybe we can supply consistent materials, mulch, paint, benches, or even new playground equipment. Something long-term. His gaze shifted around the park with a mixture of practicality and genuine interest. I'd love for the philanthropic division to see this firsthand. Ava couldn't keep the excitement from her voice. That would be incredible. Imagine how many parks we could restore if we had reliable funding. We might expand to vacant lots too. Turn them into community gardens or mini green spaces. Let neighbors transform them rather than letting them rot. He nodded, then motioned toward the gazebo. Shall we take a closer look at your handiwork? They strolled onto the grass. A stray breeze carried the fragrance of newly cut weeds and faint paint fumes. The gazebo's once peeling columns now boasted a fresh white coat. The steps leading up to it were re-stained in a warm brown. Eva stepped onto the wooden planks, testing their sturdiness. Adrian followed, placing a palm gently against a column as if to gauge the paint's dryness. Still a bit tacky, he commented with a grin. So, no leaning just yet. She laughed. It'll be fully set by tomorrow, already looking 100 times better than yesterday. They lingered beneath the gazebo's roof, watching children scamper in the distance. An elderly couple seated on a bench fed crumbs to pigeons. A teenage boy tested the newly repainted swings. The afternoon sun slanted through the latticework overhead, casting dappled shadows across the floor. The moment felt peaceful, a world away from formal boardrooms or lavish wedding tents. "What drives you to do this every weekend?" Adrian asked gently, turning his attention to Eva. "You could spend your Saturdays resting or catching up with friends or anything else." She paused, considering the question. "I suppose it's seeing immediate change in front of my eyes. Large-scale policy changes or philanthropic missions can take years to yield visible results. But here I watch a neglected corner turn into a welcoming spot for families in a single day. It's uplifting, like a tangible reminder that not all problems are insurmountable." His expression softened, respect shining in his gaze. "That's admirable, Ava. You're investing your energy directly into people's lives. Sometimes at my level, everything feels big. Investments, expansions, acquisitions. We measure success in figures, not in kids laughing on a clean playground. It's easy to lose sight of what that success should be for." She nodded, touched by his sincerity. "If we keep bridging both approaches, large-scale impact with grassroots efforts, imagine what we could accomplish." Adrian let out a light chuckle. "Yes, you could remind my corporate teams about why we invest in sustainability beyond profit margins, and I can help your group scale its amazing local impact." A fleeting pause, then a softer note crept into his voice. "And personally, it's refreshing talking to someone who cares so passionately yet asks for so little in return." Eva felt a blush warming her cheeks. She turned, pretending to admire the paint job on the railing. "Life's taught me not to expect much from anyone but myself," she admitted. "So if someone's willing to lend a hand, I'm grateful." He stepped closer, the sunlight picking out the subtle gold in his eyes. "Just so you know," he said softly, "I'm not offering help only out of pity or mere corporate goodwill. I genuinely want to be part of this effort, and—" He hesitated. "I'm also drawn to spending more time with you." The candidness of his confession wrapped around her like a gentle warmth. She recalled their dance at the wedding, the quiet conversation in the garden, the subtle feeling that they understood each other despite coming from vastly different worlds. "I feel the same," she said, carefully meeting his gaze. "I've never imagined having a connection with someone in your position, but you're not what I expected. You feel real." He exhaled, tension easing from his shoulders. "I'm relieved to hear that. In my circles, sometimes even the people I think I know turn out to be chasing their own agenda. I appreciate that you're genuine, No hidden motive other than bettering your community. For a moment, the park and its occupants faded into a distant backdrop. In the hush between them, Eva sensed the beginnings of something deeper, an unspoken promise that their meeting might extend beyond business deals and philanthropic missions. The question was how to move forward in a way that honored them both. Adrian cleared his throat, glancing at the kids playing ball in the open field. Want to walk some more? You can show me other spots in the neighborhood, that is, if you're not in a hurry. She checked the time on her phone. There was no pressing engagement. I'm free, she said brightly. Come on, there's a row of old Victorian houses 2 blocks down that the local historical society is trying to preserve. We can loop back to where you parked afterwards. He offered his arm in a playful, old-fashioned gesture. With a laugh, she slid her hand through, and they exited the gazebo, heading back across the lawn. A few curious onlookers gave them passing glances, probably wondering what the man in crisp jeans and a polished manner was doing with this local volunteer coordinator. But the two of them were absorbed in their own small universe of discovery. Walking out of the park and onto a tree-lined street, they chatted about everything from the best local food spots to the intricacies of building an environmentally friendly supply chain. At one point, an ice cream truck tinkled by, and on a whim, they both decided to buy popsicles, giggling like kids at the unexpected treat. Adrian managed to drip some melting syrup on his hand, prompting Eva to tease him for being a typical corporate genius who fumbled with something as simple as a popsicle. Time flowed easily, the sun inching toward a late afternoon glow. The conversation soared and dipped between serious topics: global sustainability, worker rights, and playful banter about their own preferences in music and sports. Eva felt a sense of wonder that it all felt so natural, as though their differences in status or daily life simply fell away in the wake of genuine curiosity. When they finally circled back to the cafe area, the day had softened into a golden hue. Adrian spotted his sleek car parked under a broad oak. He paused beside it, turning to Eva with clear reluctance in his expression, as though sorry the day had to end. This was refreshing, he said, placing a hand lightly on the car's door handle. So much better than any corporate meeting I've had in ages. Eva's heart fluttered. I agree. Thank you for letting me show you around. I hope you didn't mind seeing the less polished side of the city. Not at all. This side of the city is, in fact, the one that's most real, he responded, a gentle note in his voice. After a brief pause, he added, I have some calls to make this evening about hooking your group up with our philanthropic division, but I'll message you soon if that's okay. She nodded, smiling. Please do. And if you need more details about our work, I can send you everything we have. Perfect, Adrian said, stepping forward in a small, spontaneous motion. He hesitated for half a second, then leaned in to give her a light, warm hug. The contact was brief, yet it conveyed a depth of affection that words hadn't yet covered. Eva's pulse throbbed softly as she returned the embrace. When they pulled apart, she realized she didn't want him to go, but at the same time, she felt exhilarated by the sense of forward momentum. Take care, she said softly, and drive safely. With a parting smile, Adrian slid into his car and started the engine. Eva stepped back, giving a small wave as he pulled away from the curb. For a moment, she stood there, feeling the echoes of his closeness, the warmth of that simple hug. Then she turned, heading back to her own car parked around the corner, her heart brimming. Between the wedding, the coffee meetup, and this neighborhood walk, life had changed in just 24 hours. She still wasn't quite sure how to navigate the gap between their worlds, but for the first time she dared to imagine that maybe, just maybe, they could build a bridge through shared values, mutual respect, and a spark that felt more promising with each conversation. She slipped into the driver's seat, her reflection in the rearview mirror showing a content, hopeful smile. A new chapter was unfolding, one in which philanthropy and personal connection intertwined. And as she started her car, Eva felt that strong sense of possibility continue to hum, urging her to believe that the best kind of stories often begin in the most unlikely ways. In the days following their walk through the neighborhood, Eva dove into her routine with renewed energy. Despite the usual challenges, endlessly patching together resources for her next cleanup event, she felt buoyed by the memory of how Adrian had seemed so genuinely taken with her world. The kids playing in that park, the blossoming sense of hope in a rundown district. She'd noticed his eyes light up in a way that told her he wasn't just making polite conversation. Her phone chimed more than usual, too. Although Adrian hadn't reached out immediately with philanthropic updates, as corporate wheels sometimes moved slowly, he did text occasionally. One morning, a short message arrived. "Adrian, heading into a meeting. Wish me luck. Corporate negotiations can be as messy as those neglected lots you showed me. Hope your day's going well." Eva caught herself smiling at the screen. She typed back, "Eva, good luck. Remember, you survived that sticky popsicle. Surely you can handle some boardroom drama. My day's good. Just finished cleaning up a small side street with volunteers. Keep me posted." It was a small ritual that quickly became a comforting routine, an exchange of texts at odd hours about the mundane details of their lives. His business expansions, her volunteer events, little jokes sprinkled in between. She loved that sense of closeness formed through everyday observations rather than grand gestures. One Wednesday afternoon, while Eva was at her cramped office space, a room she shared with a tiny non-profit staff, her phone rang. She'd just finished drafting a simple flyer for an upcoming block cleanup and was about to head out to meet a local store manager who'd promised a donation of paint. She peered at the caller ID, a number she didn't recognize, possibly another volunteer. Stepping away from her desk, she answered. "Hello, Eva Clark speaking." "Good afternoon, Ms. Clark," a polished female voice responded. "This is Naomi Perez. I'm the Philanthropic Division Director at Solis Innovations. Adrian Solis asked me to reach out regarding a potential partnership with your organization." Ava's heart did a small leap. "Yes, of course. Thank you for calling. I've been hoping to hear from you. Adrian mentioned you might be in touch." Naomi's tone was cordial, yet efficient. "He spoke highly of your work. We're always interested in supporting grassroots groups that focus on environmental impact and community engagement. Adrian specifically said your volunteer team exemplifies both. Would you be available this week for a preliminary discussion? We'd love to see if your mission aligns with our current initiatives." "That would be wonderful," Eva replied, trying to hide the quickening pace of her pulse. "I can adjust my schedule anytime. Just let me know what works for you. Let's say Friday morning at our offices downtown. We can go over your existing programs, budgets, and immediate goals. If we find alignment, we'll proceed to a more formal proposal review." "That sounds perfect," Eva said. She jotted down the address and details Naomi provided. After cordial goodbyes, Eva ended the call, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her. It was happening. Adrian's promise to connect her nonprofit to his philanthropic division had come to life. This meeting could spell a new chapter for her group, especially if they secured stable funding. She texted Adrian immediately. "Eva, just got a call from Naomi at your philanthropic division, meeting on Friday. Thank you for making this happen. I'm so excited and a bit nervous." A few minutes later, his reply buzzed in. "Adrian, that's great news. Naomi's thorough but fair. Just show her the heart behind your work. No need to be nervous. I believe in you." Eva read the words twice, cherishing the surge of confidence they gave her. Friday arrived faster than expected. Eva woke up early, carefully reviewing the simple slideshow she'd prepared to illustrate her nonprofit's achievements. Before and after photos of parks, testimonies from local families, modest budget spreadsheets showing how donations had been used to buy paint, tools, gloves. She included a wish list of future goals, such as planting trees along neglected sidewalks or organizing free environmental workshops for children. She chose a professional outfit, a crisp blouse and a dark pencil skirt. It wasn't couture, but she hoped it conveyed respect. Tugging at her sleeves in the mirror, she steeled herself. She might not be a polished executive, but she knew her mission inside out. The Solis Innovations headquarters downtown soared above the skyline, a sleek glass tower that dwarfed the neighboring buildings. Eva swallowed her nerves as she entered the polished lobby, all marble floors and futuristic lighting. A courteous receptionist guided her to the philanthropic division's floor, which felt a bit more welcoming. Modern, bright decor with walls adorned by photos of renewable energy projects and philanthropic ventures. Naomi Perez, a poised woman with warm brown eyes and a neat chignon, welcomed Eva in a conference room. "Thank you for coming," she said, smiling. "I've read some preliminary notes Adrian sent over. It's impressive how you manage so much with so little." Eva offered a handshake. "It's a team effort. We're a small group, but we rely on committed volunteers who really care." Naomi gestured to a sleek table. "Please have a seat. We're casual here. This is more a conversation than a formal presentation, though if you brought materials, I'd love to see them." Eva breathed out, relieved by the friendly tone. She set up her modest laptop and began walking Naomi through a short PowerPoint. She showcased pictures of the decrepit corners they'd restored, the community events they'd organized, the families who now took pride in maintaining these spaces. Eva spoke from her heart, describing how kids deserved safe, clean areas to play, how residents gained dignity by participating in the beautification of their neighborhoods. Naomi listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions. "How do you prioritize which sites to tackle first? Have you formed any partnerships with city officials to expedite permits? How do you measure the long-term impact of a cleanup project?" Eva answered as best as she could, acknowledging that measuring long-term impact was her greatest challenge. They had no formal data analytics, mostly anecdotal evidence and basic follow-up photos. Yet, her sincerity shone through. After nearly an hour, Eva paused. "That's all I have," she concluded. "But I'm open to suggestions on how to improve or what you might need to see more quantifiable results." Naomi offered a thoughtful smile. "Your passion is evident. You have a genuine grassroots approach that we admire. Often, large charities can lose that personal touch." She leaned forward, flipping through a few printed pages. "We typically look for strategic alignment with Solis Innovations' mission, sustainability, environmental preservation, and community building. Your group clearly aligns there. The only question is scale. How quickly can you expand, and how effectively can you handle a larger grant?" Eva's heart pounded. "We'd expand carefully, ensuring we don't overreach. With the right resources, we can set up stable volunteer chapters in multiple neighborhoods, maybe even in neighboring towns." Naomi nodded. "We have an internal review process, of course, but I'm inclined to recommend your organization to our board for a pilot sponsorship. We can start with a moderate grant and see how it's utilized. If it goes well, there might be subsequent rounds of funding." Eva exhaled in relief, a smile breaking across her face. "Thank you. That means so much." Naomi checked her watch. "If you have a bit more time, we can fill out preliminary paperwork. Then we'll schedule a follow-up to finalize details. Adrian might also want to be present given he's been vocal about supporting you." At the mention of Adrian, Eva's heart gave a small flutter. She forced a nod of professionalism. "Yes, of course. I can spare as long as needed." They spent another half-hour going through forms and discussing guidelines. Eva provided references, a few volunteer testimonials, and contact info for the local businesses that had donated materials. Throughout, Naomi's demeanor remained approachable, her questions aimed at clarifying how best to channel support rather than being an interrogation. Finally, with a supportive handshake, Naomi led Eva to the elevator. "I'll pass these documents along. Expect to hear from me within a week." Eva couldn't stop smiling. "Thank you again. This is an enormous step for us." When the elevator doors slid open to the lobby, Eva stepped out feeling lighter than air. She clutched her folder, chest buzzing with excitement. True, it was just a pilot arrangement, but it far exceeded her initial hopes. She was on the cusp of establishing a real partnership that could revolutionize how her volunteer team operated. She glanced around the modern lobby, wondering if Adrian was somewhere in the building. Part of her wanted to see him right then, share the thrill of what had just transpired. But she also knew he might be in a meeting or traveling. Instead, she pulled out her phone and typed a message. Eva. Just finished meeting with Naomi. It went great. She's recommending a pilot sponsorship. I can't thank you enough for opening this door. She hesitated a moment, then added, Eva, let me know if you're free sometime to celebrate, even if it's just a coffee or a walk again. Pressing send, she took a calming breath, heading out the front doors into the sunshine of a bustling downtown. The day felt full of promise. Her nonprofit was poised to receive meaningful backing, and her connection with Adrian had just opened a new dimension. Part of her still marveled at how drastically life had changed since that wedding, when she'd quite literally stumbled into him. Making her way along the sidewalk, Eva allowed herself a flicker of daydreaming. Maybe she'd see him soon, share the news face to face, and watch that warm smile reach his eyes in that way she was beginning to crave. The city bustled around her, taxis honking, pedestrians weaving, but Eva moved through it all with a lightness in her step. A new chapter was unfolding with each day, and she felt eager, ready to turn the pages. Sleep did not come easily for Eva that night. Every time she closed her eyes, images danced behind her lids, Naomi's encouraging words, the immaculate Solus Innovations lobby, and the vision of freshly revitalized parks made possible by stable funding. Then her thoughts drifted to Adrian. She replayed his supportive text message over and over, recalling how genuinely proud he'd sounded about her meeting's success. Through the hush of her small apartment, she could practically hear the excitement in his voice, encouraging her to embrace this new chapter. The next day, she woke early to a barrage of tasks. It was Saturday, and that meant another volunteer event, this time in a neighborhood park with a broken basketball court and overgrown shrubs. Cam and Tasha had organized some local teens to help paint fresh lines on the worn asphalt, while Mr. Rosenthal agreed to supervise the weeding. Eva arrived armed with new tools the local hardware store had donated, feeling a renewed sense of capability. Knowing that significant funding might be just around the corner gave her an extra boost of confidence. By mid-morning, sweat beaded on her forehead as she hauled paint cans from the trunk of her car. The old court looked like a patchwork of faded lines and chipped concrete, but the group's enthusiasm was high. Tasha sketched chalk guidelines for the new markings, while Cam's kids gleefully carried brushes, eager to help. Mr. Rosenthal carefully unrolled measuring tapes, ensuring everything was accurate before a single brushstroke touched the ground. As Eva finished briefing the volunteers on safety and painting protocols, she felt a buzz in her back pocket. She fished out her phone. A text from Adrian. Adrian. Good morning, Volunteer Queen. Hope your project's going well. Wish I could drop by, but I'm prepping for a flight to Hong Kong later. Call me when you have a break. Her heart lifted at the playful greeting. She typed a quick reply. Eva. Hey, CEO on the go. The volunteer team's in full swing. Glad you checked in. I'll find a quiet moment soon to call. Safe travels. She tucked the phone away, stepping onto the cracked asphalt to help measure the free throw line. Even amid all the activity, paintbrushes slapping against concrete, kids joking and bumping elbows, there was a cozy glow inside her, the knowledge that Adrian had taken a moment to reach out before leaving on an international trip. Something about that small gesture spoke volumes, feeding her hope that this budding connection mattered to him as much as it did to her. Throughout the morning, she stayed hands-on, guiding volunteers, picking up stray trash, checking that kids stayed safe around the painting supplies. By noon, the sun beat down fiercely. They took a water break under the shade of a large oak tree. Cam handed out sandwiches, and Tasha wiped sweat from her brow with a grin, surveying their progress. "Looks a lot better already," Tasha declared, eyeing the freshly painted boundaries. "Guess we might lure local teams back here for pickup games soon." "That's the goal," Eva agreed, gulping down water. She glanced at her phone again, remembering Adrian's invitation. The older volunteers were lost in conversation about tomorrow's tasks, so she seized the opportunity for a quick breather. She excused herself and found a quieter corner of the park, dialing his number. He answered almost immediately, a faint hum of background noise on his end. "Eva, hi," he said. "Everything going well?" "Better than well," she replied. "We're halfway through repainting the court, and it's shaping up great. Thanks for your text. I know you're busy." A relaxed chuckle came through the line. "I'm never too busy for a quick chat with you. So, I wanted to say goodbye before I head to the airport. The flight's later this afternoon. I'll be gone about a week, maybe longer, depending on negotiations." She sank onto a low stone ledge. "Wow, that's a decent trip. Will you get any downtime, or is it all meetings and corporate dinners?" A sigh crackled through the phone. "Mostly business, but hopefully I can slip in a bit of exploring. Hong Kong's a vibrant city, though I wish I had more time to take it in. And, well, if you need anything from Naomi or her team while I'm gone, don't hesitate to call them. I've told them to keep me in the loop." Her cheeks warmed. "You don't have to worry. I can handle the conversations with Naomi. You just focus on your deal-making, but thanks for the reassurance." She paused, feeling a small twist of reluctance in her chest. "I guess we won't be able to meet in person for a while." A gentle note softened his voice. "I know, and that's frustrating, especially since things have been going so well. But I promise I'll call whenever time zones allow. Maybe we can set up a video chat if you have time. Show me your volunteer sites live." He let out a half laugh. "Might keep me grounded amid corporate chaos." She grinned, imagining him in a high-rise office halfway around the world, yet still connected to her local projects. "That would be fun. I'll do my best to schedule something. Don't forget about me on the other side of the planet." He chuckled, then dropped his tone to something more intimate. "Ava, I could never forget about you. You've made me see a world I'd overlooked for too long. Anyway, I should run. A car's picking me up soon." Heart fluttering, she said softly, "Safe flight, Adrian, and good luck. Let me know when you land, okay?" "Of course," he replied. "Take care until then." They ended the call, and Ava lingered for a moment, staring at the phone's blank screen. She tried to ignore the slight ache of missing him already, pushing it aside. A week or more away wasn't insurmountable, especially when they had plenty to keep them busy. Gathering herself, she stood and went back to her volunteers, guiding them through the rest of the work. But her mind kept wandering to the notion of Adrian in an airplane headed across oceans, stepping into a world of high-stakes negotiations. Days passed, and Ava channeled her energy into refining proposals for Naomi's philanthropic division. She typed up expansions of her group's mission, detailing how a modest grant could transform entire blocks. She listed project timelines, volunteer expansions, even hazard analyses for older playground equipment. She spent hours pouring heart and soul into these documents, determined to present the clearest possible vision. Naomi had said the board might convene soon for the pilot decision, and Eva wanted to be ready. Adrian stayed true to his word about calling, though the time difference made it tricky. Sometimes she'd wake up at 6 a.m. to find a late-night text from him describing the dizzying city lights of Hong Kong or a snippet of cultural differences he observed. Other times, she'd be stepping out of a volunteer strategy meeting at 8 p.m. and find a missed call from him because it was midday there. They snatched short calls whenever their schedules aligned, exchanges that danced between light-hearted banter and genuine emotional support. One evening, after a long volunteer planning session, Ava noticed a voicemail from him. She pressed the phone to her ear, letting his voice fill her small bedroom. "Hey, Ava, hope you're well. It's about 2 p.m. here. I just wrapped up a big meeting. Let's say corporate negotiations can be tense. Hearing your voice would help me unwind, but I know it's probably late at home. Anyway, I miss you. Not just the volunteer chats, but everything about how we connect. I'll try you again tomorrow. Sleep well." Her heart clenched at his open admission. He missed her. He needed her voice to steady him in the swirling chaos of deals and expansions. She listened to the message twice, then gently set her phone down, a mixture of longing and warmth swirling in her. She never imagined a man of his stature could be so candid about missing her. The next morning, she managed to catch him on a call, sharing small stories from her day to lift his mood while he recounted the demanding schedule of back-to-back negotiations. Even from half a world away, a closeness persisted, nurtured by these stolen moments of connection. By midweek, Eva's nerves ratcheted up. Naomi emailed her with news. The philanthropic board would discuss her proposal on Friday. If approved, the pilot funding might start as early as next month. Eva was elated, but also terrified, worrying she might have overlooked some detail. She checked her spreadsheets, the quotes for supplies, the pictures of every restored site. Tasha, noticing Eva's anxious vibe, reminded her with a grin, "You've done all you can, boss. Quit fretting." Adrian had gone quiet for a couple of days. No texts, no calls. She remembered his schedule was unpredictable, but still, worry gnawed at the back of her mind. Maybe his negotiations had intensified. Maybe he'd run into unexpected corporate landmines. She tried to be patient, focusing on her own tasks. Thursday afternoon, as she was finalizing the last pages of a presentation for Naomi, her phone vibrated. A video call request from an international number. Heart leaping, she answered. Adrian's face appeared on the screen. A bit pixelated, but unmistakably him, suit jacket off, tie loosened, an exhausted but relieved look in his eyes. "Ava," he breathed. Finally, a decent connection. Her face lit up. "Adrian, I was worried. Everything okay?" He let out a rueful chuckle, running a hand through his hair. "Business has been chaotic. We hit some major snags with the local partners, ended up in all-day sessions, but it's finally settled, and I'm flying back tomorrow." "That's great," she replied, noticing faint dark circles beneath his eyes. "You must be exhausted." He nodded, exhaling. "I am, but the deal is done, so now I can concentrate on heading home. And on you." A flicker of warmth crossed his features. "How are things on your end? Did Naomi mention anything yet about the board meeting?" Ava recapped the latest, concluding with the big Friday discussion. "We'll know soon if the pilot is a go." He offered a lopsided grin. "I have confidence in you. Naomi does too. Just remember your authenticity. That's what won everyone over." Then his voice softened. "I wish I could be there for you in person, but I promise we'll celebrate the moment I'm back." A comforting wave of affection washed over her. "Don't stress. Just get home safe. And rest. You look like you need a day off from the world." He gave a faint smile, half laughing. "If only my schedule allowed it. But yes, maybe I'll carve out a day or two. Anyway, I should go. My battery's nearly dead. I'll text you when I land, okay?" "Deal," she said. They lingered a second, each gazing at the other through the digital barrier. Even with the screen's dim clarity, she felt that same spark that had crackled ever since the wedding. The corners of his eyes crinkled in a subdued but genuine farewell, and the call ended. Staring at the blank screen, Eva realized how deeply she wanted him back in the same time zone, to share more than fleeting calls. Yet she also felt a grounding sense of purpose. No matter how strongly her feelings for him grew, she had a mission in her community that wouldn't wait. Steeling herself, she turned back to her final details for Naomi, determined to make Friday's board discussion a triumph for her volunteers, for the neighborhoods they served, and maybe, in its own way, for the delicate bond she and Adrian were building. The next day arrived in a blur. In the morning, Naomi sent a brief note. "Meeting is set for noon. Cross your fingers." Eva could hardly focus on anything else. She spent the morning organizing a modest cleanup, anxiously checking her phone every hour. Shortly before noon, she retreated to a quiet bench, gaze flitting over an email draft on her screen. She pictured Naomi presenting her proposal to a circle of discerning executives, each with questions and critiques. She pictured them analyzing her spreadsheets, her photos, her testimonies. Her heart pounded, a swirl of hope and nerves. At 12:47 p.m., her phone buzzed with an incoming call, Naomi's number. Eva's breath caught as she answered. "Hello?" On the other end, Naomi's voice was calm but brimmed with cheer. "Eva, I have good news. The board unanimously approved the pilot sponsorship. Congratulations. They're impressed with your grassroots results and your team's dedication. We'll formalize everything over the next week, but you can expect initial funds by the end of the month." Eva's breath rushed out in a half-laugh, half-gasp of relief. "Naomi, I can't even express how grateful I am. Thank you." "You earned it," Naomi said warmly. "Adrian will be proud to hear. I believe his flight lands soon." The call ended, and Eva found herself momentarily speechless, her emotions roiling, a surge of excitement, gratitude, disbelief. This was the break she and her volunteers had been praying for. No more scraping by with half-dried brushes or scrounging for leftover paint. They could expand, tackle bigger projects, bring in more volunteers. Pride swelled in her chest, thinking of how all their hard work finally paid off. She quickly typed a message to Adrian. "Ava, the board said yes, full approval for the pilot. This changes everything. Can't wait to celebrate when you're back." Her phone showed it was just past 1 p.m. He might still be mid-flight. Nevertheless, she closed her eyes, relishing the moment. Sunlight bathed the small bench where she sat, and somewhere in the distance, a group of children laughed in a playground, one that soon could receive fresh repairs or new equipment thanks to this sponsorship. And though half a world might separate her from Adrian at the moment, she felt their shared victory as a palpable bond, weaving business, philanthropy, and an undeniable personal connection into one bright tapestry of possibility. Eva let the news of the approved pilot sponsorship sink in like a warm glow spreading from her heart. Even as she walked to her car after her conversation with Naomi, she still felt a light tingle in her fingertips, as though the magnitude of this development hadn't fully anchored yet. She clutched her phone in one hand, scanning repeatedly for a response from Adrian, but the screen stayed silent. No doubt he was still somewhere between time zones. That evening, Eva returned to her apartment to find a new message waiting. "Adrian, 5:17 p.m. Touchdown. Just saw your text. Congratulations, Eva. This is huge. I'm heading home to drop my luggage, but I'd love to see you tonight if you're free. We have a lot to celebrate." She grinned so widely her cheeks ached. Without hesitation, she shot back. "Ava, 5:18 p.m. Absolutely. You name the place. I'm all yours this evening," he replied minutes later. "Adrian, 5:27 p.m. Perfect. Let's keep it simple. Meet me at the garden behind the museum at 8? It's quiet there at night. I can't wait to hear all the details." Ava's heart fluttered. The museum's garden was a small public space known for winding pathways, lush hedges, and benches tucked under blooming vines. By day, it attracted tourists and lunch break employees. By night, it was a softly lit oasis in the city's bustle. She couldn't imagine a lovelier backdrop for their long-awaited reunion. At 7:50 p.m., Eva found herself stepping carefully over the cobbled walkway leading to the museum's back gates. Her day had been a scramble, celebrations at the volunteer office, fielding texts from her excited teammates, a quick shower, then an even quicker rummage through her closet. Now she wore a breezy sundress in soft teal, a sweater draped over her shoulders for the cool night air. Her pulse quickened as she passed through the iron gates. The garden was indeed peaceful, lit by gentle lanterns spaced among the flower beds. Twisting shrubs cast playful shadows across the path. The hush of the city gave the spot an almost magical ambience. she spotted a figure standing near an ivy-draped arch, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a light jacket. Her heart gave a leap. Adrian turned at her approach. Even in the subdued light, she could see the relief and joy etched on his features. A soft grin curved his lips. "Eva." She hastened the last few steps, nearly forgetting to breathe, and found herself swept into a warm embrace. For a moment she let the tension of the past weeks drain away, inhaling the faint aroma of his cologne and the residual notes of airplane air. His arms enveloped her as though neither of them wished to let go. When they finally pulled back, he studied her face, eyes shining. "Congratulations, Ms. Approved Sponsorship. I knew you'd nail it." She laughed softly, feeling an uncontainable surge of happiness. "I can hardly believe it. It's like a dream. Funding, new resources, my volunteers are over the moon." Then she tapped his chest, playful. "But let's not forget, none of this would have happened so quickly if you hadn't opened that door. I'm grateful." Adrian shook his head. "The work is yours. I just nudged it along. But seeing you so excited—" He paused, his voice trembling with subdued emotion. "That's the best reward for me." They strolled deeper into the garden, letting the hush of night carry them. Eva recounted Naomi's phone call in detail, describing the moment the pilot sponsorship became official. Adrian shared snippets of his own trip, negotiations that finally concluded, the stress of back-to-back meetings, and the relief of being on home soil again. Through the conversation, there was a gentle undercurrent of closeness, as if each step they took wove their worlds more tightly together. They came upon a small wooden bench tucked beneath a vine-laden trellis. Pale blossoms illuminated by the garden's lanterns glowed faintly overhead. Wordlessly, they sat. Eva slipped off her sweater, resting it by her side, and turned to face Adrian. "What happens next?" she asked quietly. "With the sponsorship, I mean. Naomi said we'd get the initial funds soon. We'll start by restoring more playgrounds, maybe invest in bigger improvements like battered basketball hoops or new gardening tools. But after that pilot phase, the possibilities keep growing. It's almost scary." He took her hand gently, his thumb grazing the back of her knuckles. "Don't be scared. You've got the passion, a team that believes in you, and now you have resources. You'll adapt. Keep your mission clear, and it'll expand naturally." His reassurance calmed the flutter in her chest. "You make it sound so easy," she teased. "What about you? Are you home for long now, or jetting off again?" A wry smirk tugged at his lips. "There's always another flight eventually, but I'm hoping to stay put at least a week or two. I want to show my philanthropy team we're serious about supporting your group. And truthfully," his gaze flickered over her face, "I want to spend time with you, without a million miles in between." Her heart thudded. Gently, she freed one hand to rest on his cheek, amazed at how natural the gesture felt. "I'd like that too." He exhaled slowly, letting his forehead graze hers for a tender second. "Ava, I want to be honest. I've never quite felt this connection so quickly, especially under such unusual circumstances. Meeting you at that wedding was such a fluke, but it's turned into one of the best things that's happened to me in ages." Her eyes stung with emotion, a swirl of gratitude and warmth. "Funny how a clumsy accident can change everything," she murmured, remembering the way she'd fallen into his arms, terrified she'd just made the biggest scene of her life. He chuckled, and she felt the slight vibration of his laughter. "If that's what it took to bring us together, I can't complain. I only regret not tripping into you sooner." They both dissolved into soft laughter, the tension of so many busy days melting into this sweet, unguarded moment. Beneath the canopy of nighttime blossoms, it felt like they existed in their own small universe. Two people bridging worlds through shared values and an unlikely spark of romance. Eva leaned back, her hand still entwined with his. "So what does all of this look like for us? We've both got obligations. My volunteer expansions, your global expansions. I don't want to be a distraction, but I also—" She trailed off, unsure how to frame the swirling feelings that encompassed her longing to be near him and her commitment to her work. Adrian's expression turned earnest. "You're not a distraction, Eva. Far from it. You're an inspiration. If anything, I'd want to find ways to merge our lives in a way that complements each other. Maybe it starts with me coming to your volunteer days when I'm free, or you giving talks to our corporate staff about real-world grassroots issues. We can collaborate in practical ways, but we can also take time just for us. Dinner, a movie, a walk like this without any agenda." Tears pricked her eyes at his sincerity. She gave a short nod, lips curving into a hopeful smile. "That sounds perfect. Let's do it. One step at a time." They sat in companionable silence for a while, letting that plan settle into the hush of the garden. A light breeze stirred the vines overhead, scattering faint petals along the bench. Some landed on their shoulders and laps, a gentle confetti of white blossoms. Eva picked one off Adrian's jacket, and he laughed softly, plucking another from her hair. Time seemed to slow. At last, Eva asked quietly, "Do you want to walk around more, or—" Adrian scanned the twinkling lights and the winding paths. "I do. But first—" He slid closer, eyes flicking to her lips. The question was evident in his gaze. Her breath caught. She'd thought about kissing him before, but it was always overshadowed by the swirl of business details and parted continents. Now, under the hush of starlight and drifting petals, it felt right. So she tipped her chin up, and he closed that small space between them. The kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a soft melding of warmth and newfound intimacy. His hand pressed lightly at her waist, hers slipped up to cradle the back of his neck. A cascade of sensations, his quiet exhale, the faint taste of mint from his breath, the subtle crinkle of his shirt's collar, flooded her consciousness. Neither rushed, neither held back. It was a confirmation of everything unspoken they'd shared since the night of the wedding. When they finally broke apart, they lingered in each other's orbit, foreheads nearly touching. Eva smiled so broadly her cheeks hurt. Adrian's own grin was equally radiant. No words seemed necessary. They both sensed the significance of what had just passed between them. Eventually, he took her hand, kissing it once. "I believe that's the best way to celebrate your pilot sponsorship and my successful negotiations," he teased gently. Her laugh bubbled up, melodic in the quiet. "Agreed. All our expansions, personal and professional, seem to be off to a wonderful start." Hand in hand, they left the bench to wander the garden's moonlit pathways. The city's distant hum faded beneath the gentle chirping of night insects. Overhead, stars peeked through parted clouds. Each step felt like a promise of growth, of collaboration, and of a future where philanthropic dreams and a fragile, growing love could intertwine and thrive. At the gate, they paused to share one last embrace before stepping back into the bustling world. Neither was certain exactly what the coming months would hold, only that whatever challenges they faced, they would no longer face them alone. And as they headed to their cars, exchanging lingering glances and whispered goodnights, both believed wholeheartedly that sometimes the smallest, most accidental beginnings truly could lead to an extraordinary new chapter in both love and life. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.